Hello and welcome to the Futures Lab. So the whole point of Undertale is that you're able to make friends with the enemies that you face in battles, and you do this primarily through the Act submenu. We're going to program that in this week. We're also going to program in friendship. But first, we need to fix two bugs that were left over from last session. So go into your heart sprite. So we have some code in here already that says when we receive the text broadcast, we hide the heart, which is exactly what we want to happen. That's good. When the text shows up right here in this box, we want the heart to go away. And we do show the heart when the heart gets sent back to the box before an evade happens. However, there is one problem. If we hide the heart and then stop the program halfway through, when we start again, the heart is still hidden. So what we need to do is we need to go to looks and get out a show and put that right underneath when green flag clicked. Okay, let's start the program again and see if it comes back, and it does. That's good. We've got one more glitch we need to solve. Now this is fairly minor, but watch what happens when we select the fight option. This is all normal, but watch the box very closely. Did you see that? It went small, but then it went large again. This is a fairly minor problem, but there is a way of solving it. The reason that this happens is because in the fight sprite, at the very bottom of when I receive fight, this is where we broadcast the end player's turn. And this is where there'll be code that makes the box go small. And that's when the dialogue starts. The problem is that the mode is still set to /, and the box has a specific costume that it will always revert to during the / mode. So a nice easy way to fix this is just to invent a new mode. We're going to get out a set mode to after /. And now this bit of code here that always makes the box go large again will not trigger because the mode will be different. Let's give that a test, shall we? We'll do the fight, and the / happens, and watch the mode, and now it is after /, and you can see the box is nice and small, and the menu has disappeared, so it's a bit more consistent. Now here's something you'll have to bear in mind though. If you decide that you want specific dialogue to happen after you choose fight, you've got to remember that when you put that code together, so for example, you'd probably have a my block that was called fight, and it would have something very similar to what we did before. Something like this. Now normally you'd say something like if mode equals fight, but you've got to remember that the mode is not going to be fight here. You've got to make sure that this is if mode equals after /, and then put in whatever dialogue you want. And that is only if you want there to be specific dialogue that happens after you choose to fight. I'm going to get rid of this for now because I don't want any specific dialogue to happen after I choose fight. But if I change my mind in the future, I'll remember to use the if mode equals after / to make all of the dialogue happen. So let's get rid of this for now. Okay, so now we've got those glitches fixed, let's program in our act, shall we? Now, when we select act, we want basically the same kind of thing that happens when we select mercy. We want this sub-menu to appear, and it's just some of the details that are going to be different. Most of the code can be the same. So let's go to our heart sprite, and let's have a look at our mercy code and see what we can just copy from that. So define mercy, let's have a look. Now, all of this is actually not specific to mercy, except for this bit here, which references the mercy submenu, and this bit here, which again pulls the right option out of that list we made, the mercy submenu. So we could just copy this whole thing, change these two names, and it will work. But that's pretty inefficient, having all this code exactly the same, having it all copied, because we're going to have to do that again for item as well. Here's a clever way of making sure that we have clean and elegant code. We're going to get this whole bit of code and drag it out of define mercy. Then we're going to click on Make a Block, and we're going to call this Submenu. And we're going to add an input. And we're going to call this input Available Options. When you've got all that, press OK. And we're going to put this define submenu on top of all that code. Now all we need to do is get this if key Z pressed and put it underneath define mercy, and then get out a submenu and put it underneath define mercy right here, and then get this length of mercy submenu and put it over here, and get out available options and put it right here where our length of mercy submenu was. Remember, this available options is the number of different options we have, the number of different items or different act we have, or different things we can do inside mercy. So now what we'll be able to do is copy all of this, change these two things, and the whole thing will work for act as well. So let's right click on this here, duplicate, move that down. Let's create a new block. We'll call it act. Press OK. Drag define act and put it over here. Now we're going to need to create our new list to make sure that we have this list to pull from. So go to variables and click on make a list. Make sure it's for all sprites, and we're going to call this act submenu. Press OK, and now we've got our nice list right here. That's looking good, and we're going to put some cool options in there. And then all we need to do is change this mercy submenu right here to act submenu, and this mercy submenu to act submenu as well. And that's looking pretty good. All we need to do now is make sure that we go through to find when green flag clicked. Look for if mode equals mercy. Right click on that if, duplicate it because we have a new type of mode, don't we? Change this here to act. Take out this my block mercy and replace it with this my block act. We also need to make sure that the define menu code is updated. So if we look for define menu and then look towards the bottom, we'll find that we have something happens if mode equals fight and something happens if mode equals mercy. Now we need something to happen if mode equals act. So right click on one of these, duplicate it, and let's change this one to if menu button selected equals 1. Remember, if fight is menu button selected 0, 0, 1, 2, 3. So if this variable equals 1, then we've selected the act. So after we've updated this set mode to act, we also need to broadcast a new message called act. Press OK. Okay, let's give that a test, shall we? See how much of it works. So let's make sure that the mercy still works now that we've messed around with its code. So let's select mercy, and yep, we've still got access to spare and flee. That's looking good. That's pulling out of its list. Now let's press X to get back. And let's try act. Oh, that's really good. Our mode is set to act. Our heart is in the middle. We have no option to choose from, but that's because this menu is empty and we haven't made the costumes yet. So that's the perfect opportunity to head across to our submenu sprite and add those two things in. So do that with me now. So let's have a look here and see what we'll need changing. Okay, well, this is going to need changing because it specifically mentions the mode not being mercy. We're going to need a new one of these when I receive mercy. And we're also going to need to add some things into our new list, our act submenu list. So let's start off by doing that. I'm just going to right click on this and duplicate these. I'm going to delete everything in the act submenu, and then I'm going to add some things to the act submenu. Now think about what you want in your Undertale game. These are the things I'm going to choose. I want to have check. That's a classic thing you can do in Undertale. It generally gives you the enemy's stats, which usually doesn't actually mean very much, but it can be kind of fun. And it will also give you a clue of how best to make friends with that enemy, usually. The next option I'm going to make is called argue. And this is a trick. If you try and argue with Scratch, it will achieve nothing. It won't increase your friendship. It won't do anything good. It is just fruitless. It never works, which you always need some ways in which to fail if you want the game to mean anything. There has to be the right way to win and the wrong way to win, and arguing never works in my game. The next is going to be compliment. Now this is the way you're going to make friends with the enemy in my Undertale game, and it's also going to unlock a fourth option called hug. But I'm not going to have this option be available at the beginning. So we're going to use that later. Next, we need to make sure that we update the costumes. So go to the costumes tab up here, duplicate one of these, and let's rename this. So the first one we want is check. Make sure that you change the name of it as well. Then we're going to do the same for argue, the same for compliment, and the same for hug. Now it's very important that you spell all of the names of your costumes correctly. Otherwise, your code will not work properly. Let's head back to the code. Now we need something to respond to our act broadcast. So we're going to duplicate this when I receive mercy. Put this here. I'm going to change this to act. Change this mercy submenu to act submenu. And the same here. Now, of course, we know we're not meant to repeat code like this, and I did originally try and combine act, mercy, and item all into one my block, but it got a bit complicated with the way that Scratch handles lists, and in the end I decided to stay with this way as it's simpler and easier to follow. But if you figure out a really easy, elegant way to turn act, mercy, and item all into the same my block, let me know how you solve that in the comments. I'd be really interested to see what other people figure out. Okay, so we've just got one more thing that we need to fix now, and that is the code underneath when I start as clone. So when we select the mercy mode, these options appear, these submenu options. And when it stops being the mercy mode, like when we select one of them, it'll become the spare mode or the flee mode, or when we exit back to the menu mode, they delete themselves. So far, so good. The problem is that this only works if we're in the mercy menu. If we select the act menu, they delete themselves straight away, which is annoying. But there's a simple solution. We're going to make a new variable. We're going to call it submenu, and we're going to make it for this sprite only. Press OK, and we're going to set the submenu to the mode every time we receive act or mercy. So we're going to set submenu to mode. So when we receive act, it's going to set this submenu variable to act. Then we just need the same thing underneath our when I receive mercy. And then we just need to get out our submenu variable and put it right here into our when I start as clone. This means that when we select act now, we should get our 3 submenu options appearing. And when we leave the act mode, they disappear. And the same with mercy. There we go, all working. So what do we need to program in next? Well, remember the order of events in an Undertale turn. After you've selected a submenu action, we need to put in what the text box says, and then what the enemy says. So let's go across to our text sprite. Now, so far we only have one particular bit of text that comes up, and that's when we select flee. So let's create some more of these. Let's go to My Blocks, and let's click on Make a Block. And so that it's a bit easier to read what these are all for, let's call this act, all in capitals, and then a space and a dash. And I'm going to say check, and press OK. And let's make another block, which is act argue, then act complement, and act hug. And let's rename that flee so that it's called mercy flee. Let's move all these defines. They've got a bit of space. And we'll move blocks just underneath when I receive text. Make sure that they are all there. You should have 4 different act blocks and your mercy block. That's nice and visual. We know what each of these my blocks does. So let's copy across this here. Now, with each of these, you need to have if mode equals and then the name of the mode. So argue or complement or whatever. Then put in the text that you want, and then you need a wait until key any pressed. So let's do our check first, shall we? Get our define act check. If mode equals check. Now, I'm pretty happy with this here. If you want to test what you've written, all you need to do is drag it out and click on it once, and you can see what it looks like here. Now, if you don't like the way that it looks, if you think your letters are too big or too close together, remember, you can change that if you go to your right block. You can try changing the size here, drop it down to 75%. If you want to be able to fit more onto a line, you could even change this down as well. If the letters are small enough, you can make the gap smaller, maybe 14. We can see what it looks like then. If I just press the stop button, start again. So you've got a fair amount of control. Okay, let's pop this back inside here where it belongs. And let's move on to the next one, shall we? Let's try out argue. I'm going to duplicate this to make it nice and easy and rewrite some of this text. Remember to make sure that you update this here. It needs to say if mode equals argue. Let's give the text a little bit of a test. See how it looks. And now we're going to move on to our define act complement. And this is where I'm going to get a bit more interesting. So this is a fine start, but I want the player to be choosing the complement option a bunch of different times if they want to build up enough friendship in order to achieve the pacifist ending. And to make that more interesting, choosing the same option over and over and over again, I want there to be a bunch of different complements, and whichever complement you get will be random. So let's go to variables and make a new variable. Let's call this complement, and let's make it for this sprite only. Press OK. Get out set complement to pick random 1 to 4. I'm going to have 4 different random complements that you can give to Scratch. So what I'm going to do is get out an if then, put it right here, make sure this wait until happens right before the end. Then we need an equals, we need a complement variable, and we'll make this complement 1. So as you can see, the first line is always going to be the same. You tell Scratch that, and then what you can do is duplicate these and add in your additional complements like so. So this is a really fun way of making this sort of hybrid system where line 1 is always the same and line 2 and 3 are always different depending on this random number that we're making. So now, if we have complement 1 from this random number generator, it'll say, you tell Scratch that their orange fur is wonderful and fluffy. And if you get complement 2, it'll do, you tell Scratch that they have a really nice smile. So here are complements 3 and 4. I'm just going to put this right here. As always, make sure that the if mode equals is correct and spelled correctly. And make sure that you've got to wait until key any press just before the end. And if you didn't want to use a random number like I'm doing here, you could actually instead use a complement counter, kind of like how we did with our dialogue counter and our spare counter in our last session. You just need to change the variable by 1 each time, and then the complements will come out in order. And we've just got one more to do, and that's act hug. So I'm just going to copy across one of the others. Remember to change this here. I'm pretty happy with the description that I've written here. Remember, Undertale characters don't move around a lot, and they don't usually animate very much either. So the text box is usually the best time you have to describe what it is that they are doing and how they are reacting to your choices. Okay, and now we need to decide how it is our enemy is going to respond to some of these choices. So go to the enemy sprite. We've already got our define spare and define flee. Let's rename those just like we did with the my blocks in the text sprite. So let's rename flee to mercy flee. And let's rename spare to mercy spare. So now we can create some my blocks for our act submenu choices. Now, for check, I'm actually not going to make one because you don't have to have the enemy say something specific after every action. You don't have to have the enemy say something every turn. It's fine for there to be gaps. And remember, we've got those generic dialogues that will probably fill up a lot of the gaps anyway. So I'm going to skip out on act check. I don't need anything there. So let's move to act argue. Let's click on make a block. We'll call it act argue. Press OK. Let's drag this down here. Let's make another one. Act complement. Drag that down there. And another one. Act hug. And drag that down there. Now make sure that you get your act argue and put it right here into our when I receive end player's turn. Get the act complement as well, and the act hug. Put them with your mercy spare and your mercy flee. We need to make sure that they are in the list of different responses to be run. Now let's go and put some code underneath define act argue. So remember, for each of these, we're going to need an if mode equals and then the name of the action. And then just before the end, we're going to need a set mode to dialogue ended. So this is the response that Scratch is going to give when you try and argue with them, and it's always going to be the same. Let's see if that works, shall we? We're going to select act, and we're going to try to argue. So first, you tell Scratch that they are wrong about literally everything. There's no point in arguing with me. Now, this is going to be the same each time we do it. We're always going to have the same thing in the text box, and Scratch is always going to say the same thing. And I want it to be that way, because the player, if you do something over and over and over and over again, and it's always the same and it never works, the player knows that is not the correct way to solve the problem. If you make it always slightly different, the player might think, oh, maybe just a few more times arguing, and finally I'll win the argument and something good will happen. So I'm happy with this as it is. Let's get our act complement and let's put some different text in here. So the text is in, but now we need to bring in our friendship mechanic. Each time we complement Scratch, we need to build up our friendship variable. So go to variables, get out change friendship by 7. Now, do you remember? We need to get to friendship 50 in order to achieve the pacifist ending. So I want to be able to unlock a different act submenu option, the hug, once we achieve a friendship of above 20. So let's go to control and get out an if then. Let's put that here, move all that below it. We need to make sure that friendship is above 20. So get out a more than, put a 20 in there, get out friendship. And once we've got a friendship of more than 20, We want to go to variables and get out add thing to act submenu. We want to add in hug. But there's a problem. Each time we complement, if our friendship is above 20, we can add more and more hugs to the act submenu, which will look very weird because it'll just fill up the screen. It'll keep making more clones of itself. So we also need to check to make sure that hug isn't already in the submenu. And that's nice and easy. We just need to go to operators, get out a not, and also an and. Then we need to go to variables, look down until you get this one here, act submenu contains thing, put that into the not, change the thing to hug, and then take this friendship more than 20 and the not and put them both into the and. And now it will only add hug into this list once both of these are true. Both the friendship is above 20 and hug isn't already in the list. Okay, well, let's give it a test, shall we? I'm going to go to the attack sprite and I'm going to pull out all of the attacks. I'm just going to put back in this set mode to menu just so that we can skip the evade section. And that way we can see what happens over the course of multiple turns, nice and quickly. Okay, let's check argue. Yeah, that all seems good. Let's try complement. Let's try complementing again. Now you can see that the friendship over here is going up. If we try one more complement, you can see what's happened here. The hug has been added to our list in our act submenu. So now we should be able to do a hug. Of course, we haven't programmed that yet though, have we? Let's fix that. So here we go. If mode equals hug, change friendship by 15, switch costume to happy, wait 0.5 seconds, and enemy speech bubble thank you. All right, now it should work if we just select it in here. Scratch accepts the hug you have offered. Thank you. There we go. And that's all you need for this week. I hope you're able to get creative and make completely different choices and options and dialogue than I've made. I cannot wait to see what you guys make. Let me know how you go. As always, subscribe and ring the bell if you want to get a notification for the next episode. Let me know in the comments what you would like me to do next, or if you need any help. And aside from that, stay awesome, be cool to each other, and take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time, ninjas.